Imagine investing your life savings, not in a risky startup, but in a company that was considered one of Europe's greatest financial success stories. A company trusted by banks, governments, global investors, and even Germany's financial regulators. It wasn't a small business. It wasn't an unknown startup. It was worth more than 24 billion euros. It was listed on Germany's most prestigious stock market index. And for years, almost everyone believed the same thing. Wirecard was the future of digital payments. The company's story sounded almost perfect. A German technology company, competing with global payment giants, processing billions of transactions every year, expanding across Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. Investors loved the vision. Analysts praised the numbers. Financial journalists called it one of Germany's greatest technology success stories. Everything looked unstoppable, but behind the impressive presentations, behind the glowing annual reports, and behind the billions of euros flowing through its payment systems, there was a secret so enormous that when it was finally exposed, it didn't just destroy one company. It shook the reputation of Germany's entire financial system. This wasn't simply another accounting mistake. It wasn't a minor reporting error. It was one of the largest corporate frauds Europe had ever witnessed. Billions of euros vanished. Executives were arrested. Auditors faced global criticism. And investors around the world lost billions. The company was called Wirecard. Today, its name has become a warning, a reminder that even the most respected companies can sometimes hide extraordinary lies. Because in the world of finance, trust is everything, and once trust disappears, everything else follows. To understand how one of Europe's biggest financial champions collapsed so dramatically, we need to go back, long before the headlines, long before the investigations, long before billions of euros mysteriously disappeared. We need to return to the late 1990s, when digital payments were still a brand new industry. Back then, the internet was growing rapidly. Online shopping was becoming more common. Businesses around the world needed secure ways to process digital payments. Most traditional banks were slow to adapt, but one small German company saw an opportunity. If people were going to buy products online, someone needed to move the money. That simple idea became the foundation of Wirecard. The company promised fast, secure, modern payment processing. At first, very few people paid attention. Wirecard worked quietly behind the scenes, helping online businesses accept digital payments. Most customers never even noticed the company's name, but investors slowly did. Year after year, revenue appeared to grow. New partnerships were announced. International expansion accelerated, and confidence continued rising. By the early 2010s, Wirecard was no longer a small payment processor. It had become one of Germany's fastest-growing technology companies. Wall Street noticed, London noticed, Singapore noticed. Even Silicon Valley began paying attention. Everyone wanted exposure to digital payments. Cash was disappearing. Cards were everywhere. Smartphones were changing consumer behavior, and Wirecard seemed perfectly positioned for the future. Every earnings report looked stronger than the last. Every acquisition appeared strategic. Every investor presentation promised another phase of explosive growth. The company wasn't just selling payment technology. It was selling a vision, a future where every transaction, every purchase, and every payment would move through companies like Wirecard. Investors believed they had found Europe's answer to PayPal. The stock price climbed. Institutional investors increased their positions. Mutual funds bought millions of shares. Pension funds joined the excitement. Wirecard became one of Germany's corporate stars. But success can create something dangerous. Expectation. Once investors expect constant growth, companies feel enormous pressure to deliver, quarter after quarter, year after year, no matter what. And sometimes, that pressure becomes impossible to satisfy honestly. For years, almost nobody questioned the numbers. Why would they? The auditors approved the financial statements. Regulators defended the company. Analysts kept recommending the stock. Everything looked legitimate. Everything looked professional. Everything looked safe. But appearances can be incredibly deceptive. Because while investors celebrated another record year, a handful of journalists were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. Questions that almost nobody wanted to hear. Questions that would eventually expose one of the biggest financial frauds in European history. And once those questions were answered, Wirecard's perfect image would begin to crack. By the middle of the 2000s, Wirecard was no longer a small technology company. It had become one of Germany's fastest-rising financial firms. Every year seemed better than the last. Revenue increased. Profits increased. The share price climbed steadily. Investors believed they were witnessing the future of digital payments. The timing couldn't have been better. Around the world, cash payments were slowly disappearing. Credit cards became more common. Online shopping exploded. Smartphones changed how people bought products. Every digital purchase needed one thing: a payment processor. Wirecard positioned itself perfectly. Unlike banks, Wirecard promised speed. Unlike traditional financial institutions, it promised innovation. Executives described the company as a technology business, not simply another payment company. That distinction mattered. Technology companies received higher valuations, higher expectations, and much greater investor excitement. The company's chief executive officer, Markus Braun, became the face of that vision, always dressed in his trademark black turtleneck. He projected confidence, calm, precision. Many investors compared his presentation style to leaders from Silicon Valley. He spoke about artificial intelligence, digital finance, global expansion, and a future where Wirecard would become one of the world's most important financial technology companies. Investors believed every word. Financial analysts praised his leadership. Television interviews strengthened his reputation. Business magazines featured him on their covers. He became one of Germany's most respected technology executives. Wirecard expanded rapidly across Europe, then Asia, then the Middle East, then Africa. Almost every earnings report announced another partnership, another acquisition, another market entered, another record-breaking quarter. The company seemed unstoppable. Then came a historic moment. In 2018, Wirecard achieved something almost nobody thought possible. It entered Germany's prestigious DAX index. The DAX represented the country's largest and most valuable public companies. Joining the index was a symbol of success. It also meant that countless investment funds would automatically purchase Wirecard shares. Demand increased immediately. The stock price reached new highs. Even more remarkable, Wirecard replaced one of Germany's oldest and most respected financial institutions in the index. To many people, it symbolized a changing world. Old banking was fading. Financial technology was taking over. Wirecard became the perfect example of that transformation. By this point, the company's valuation exceeded 24 billion euros. For a payment processor founded only a few years earlier, the achievement seemed extraordinary. Shareholders celebrated. Employees celebrated. Executives celebrated. Germany celebrated. But hidden behind the celebrations, something else was happening. Something much quieter, far less visible. A handful of investigative journalists had started looking deeper into the company's financial reports. At first, their questions seemed minor. Why were so many profits coming from overseas partners? Why were certain business relationships difficult to verify? Why did some reported cash balances seem unusually large? Most investors ignored these concerns. After all, Wirecard had been audited. Its financial statements carried professional approval. Why doubt them? The journalists refused to stop. They traveled across Asia, visited company addresses, spoke with former employees, reviewed corporate records, compared official statements with real-world evidence. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. Some partner companies appeared unusually difficult to locate. Certain offices looked almost empty. Some reported business activities seemed far smaller than company reports suggested. Questions multiplied. Answers became harder to find. Instead of welcoming scrutiny, Wirecard fought back. Executives denied every allegation. The company insisted that critics were spreading false information. Lawyers threatened legal action. Public statements accused journalists of trying to manipulate the stock price. Surprisingly, many people believed Wirecard because the company still looked successful. Revenue continued growing, profits continued increasing, the share price remained strong, and regulators appeared to support the company. One of Germany's financial regulators even took an extraordinary step. Instead of investigating Wirecard first, attention shifted toward investors betting against the company's stock. Short sellers were accused of attempting to profit from negative rumors. For many observers, it was an astonishing decision. The company under investigation seemed to receive more protection than scrutiny. That only strengthened public confidence. If regulators trusted Wirecard, why shouldn't investors?
The company's reputation became even stronger. Questions were dismissed, warnings were ignored, and billions more flowed into the business. But beneath the surface, the investigation was gathering momentum. Evidence was accumulating. Documents were being examined. Witnesses were coming forward. Each discovery pointed toward the same disturbing possibility. The financial success that had amazed Europe might not have been entirely real. Some of the company's reported cash could not be independently confirmed. Some overseas operations appeared impossible to verify. Some transactions existed only on paper. The deeper investigators looked, the more difficult it became to separate fact from fiction. Still, most shareholders refused to believe it. After all, how could one of Germany's most respected public companies, one trusted by regulators, auditors, banks, and global investors, be hiding a fraud worth billions? It seemed impossible, but history has shown something remarkable. The biggest financial scandals rarely begin with obvious lies. They begin with small questions. Questions that nobody wants to ask. Questions that almost everyone hopes will disappear. Wirecard ignored those questions. And soon, the entire world would discover why. Because the next chapter wouldn't simply damage the company. It would expose one of the most shocking accounting scandals Europe had ever seen. For years, Wirecard had managed to silence its critics. Every accusation, every warning, every uncomfortable question was met with the same response. The company insisted that everything was legal, everything was audited, everything was under control. But in 2019, the pressure became impossible to ignore. One newspaper refused to back down. That newspaper was the Financial Times. Its investigative journalists had spent months examining Wirecard's business, reviewing confidential documents, speaking with former employees, comparing financial records, and following money across multiple countries. What they discovered was deeply disturbing. According to their investigation, there were serious signs that Wirecard's financial statements could not be trusted. Some overseas revenues appeared suspicious. Some business partners seemed impossible to verify. Some accounting records simply didn't make sense. The articles sent shockwaves through financial markets. Wirecard immediately denied every allegation. Executives called the reports false, misleading, and harmful. The company even claimed it was the victim of an organized campaign designed to damage its reputation. For a while, many investors believed the company. The stock price recovered after each denial. Supporters argued that critics were simply trying to profit from falling share prices. Confidence survived, but only temporarily. Behind the scenes, auditors began asking far more difficult questions. Documents were requested. Bank confirmations were demanded. Financial records were reviewed line by line. This time, simple explanations were no longer enough. Then came one of the most astonishing discoveries in modern corporate history. Wirecard claimed that 1.9 billion euros in cash was sitting safely in bank accounts in the Philippines. It was an enormous amount of money, nearly 1/4 of the company's balance sheet. If the cash existed, the company could survive. If it didn't, everything would collapse. Auditors contacted the banks. They wanted independent confirmation. The response they received was shocking. The bank said the money wasn't there. In fact, they said the documents used to prove the cash balances were fake. The confirmation letters were fraudulent. The accounts did not contain 1.9 billion euros because they had never contained it. The news spread across financial markets within hours. Investors couldn't believe what they were hearing. How could 1.9 billion euros simply disappear? The answer was even more unbelievable. It hadn't disappeared. According to investigators, it had never existed at all. The foundation of Wirecard's financial empire had collapsed overnight. Without that money, the company's balance sheet no longer made sense. Years of reported profits suddenly became questionable. The company's credibility evaporated. Trust vanished almost instantly. Inside Wirecard's headquarters, chaos erupted. Emergency meetings continued around the clock. Executives searched desperately for explanations. Lawyers prepared for investigations. Employees watched the crisis unfold in disbelief. Then, the company made an announcement that stunned the world. Wirecard admitted that the 1.9 billion euros supposedly held in trust accounts was, most likely, non-existent. One sentence, just a few words. Yet those words destroyed one of Europe's largest financial technology companies.
The stock market reacted immediately. Shares collapsed by more than 70%. Then they fell even further. Billions of euros in shareholder value disappeared almost overnight. Institutional investors suffered enormous losses. Pension funds lost millions. Ordinary people watched years of savings vanish within days. The man who had become the face of Wirecard, Chief Executive Officer Markus Braun, resigned. Shortly afterward, he was arrested by German authorities. Investigators accused him of helping create one of the largest accounting frauds in European history. The executive, once celebrated as Germany's technology visionary, now faced criminal charges. But another executive became even more mysterious. His name was Jan Marsalek. He served as Wirecard's chief operating officer. Unlike Markus Braun, Marsalek never appeared before investigators, because before authorities could question him, he disappeared. One day, he was in Germany. The next, he was gone. Reports suggested he flew to Belarus. Other reports claimed he entered Russia. Some investigators believed he received assistance from powerful international contacts. No one knew for certain. Years later, his exact whereabouts remained unknown. He became one of Europe's most wanted fugitives. As police searched across multiple countries, new revelations continued to emerge. Investigators alleged that fake companies had been used to create imaginary business transactions. False documents had allegedly convinced auditors that billions of euros existed. Complex international structures had hidden the truth for years. The fraud was far larger and far more sophisticated than almost anyone had imagined. Then CME, the final blow. On June 25, 2020, Wirecard officially filed for insolvency. It became the first company ever removed from Germany's prestigious DAX index after collapsing into bankruptcy. A business once valued at over 24 billion euros had fallen to almost nothing in just a matter of days. For Germany, the scandal became a national embarrassment. For investors, it became one of the most expensive financial disasters in European history. For regulators, it exposed serious failures in oversight. And for auditors, it raised painful questions about how billions of euros could supposedly exist, without anyone confirming they were actually there. Yet one final question still remained. How could so many intelligent people, experienced investors, professional auditors, government regulators, and global financial institutions miss the warning signs for so many years? The answer would change how Europe viewed corporate oversight forever, and it would leave behind lessons that every investor, every entrepreneur, and every public company would remember for decades. Wirecard was gone. A company once celebrated as Europe's greatest fintech success had collapsed into bankruptcy. Billions of euros had vanished. Thousands of investors suffered enormous losses. Employees lost their jobs. And Germany faced one of the biggest corporate scandals in its modern history. But the collapse of Wirecard wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Because now, governments wanted answers, investors demanded accountability, and regulators had to explain how one of Europe's largest public companies had managed to deceive the financial world for so many years. The investigations quickly expanded. German prosecutors searched company offices. Electronic devices were seized. Emails were examined. Financial records were reconstructed. Witnesses were questioned. Every document became potential evidence. Investigators believed that Wirecard had spent years creating a false image of financial success. Fake revenues, questionable business partners, imaginary profits, and perhaps most astonishing of all, cash that never existed. Attention soon turned toward the auditors. For years, Wirecard's financial statements had been approved by one of the world's largest accounting firms. Many investors believed those audit reports guaranteed the numbers were accurate. But after the scandal, people asked an uncomfortable question. How could auditors fail to detect a missing 1.9 billion euros? The auditing profession faced intense criticism. Financial experts argued that stronger verification procedures should have identified the problem much earlier. Governments began reviewing auditing standards. Regulators introduced new oversight measures. The scandal changed how major companies would be examined in the future. Germany also faced difficult questions. Its financial regulator had defended Wirecard against critics. Journalists who raised concerns were investigated. Short sellers were blamed. Warning signs had been ignored. Instead of asking whether the company was lying, authorities had often questioned the people exposing the lies. That mistake became one of the scandal's most painful lessons. Meanwhile, former shareholders struggled to recover. Many had invested because Wirecard appeared safe. It wasn't a speculative startup anymore. It belonged to Germany's most prestigious stock market index. It had respected auditors, well-known executives, global partnerships, to ordinary investors. It looked trustworthy. That trust proved incredibly expensive. Some investment funds lost hundreds of millions of euros. Pension funds suffered heavy losses. Individual investors watched years of savings disappear. For many families, the financial damage would never fully be repaired. Then there was the mystery of Jan Marsalek. Even after Wirecard collapsed, he remained missing. International investigators searched for him. Intelligence agencies became involved. Reports linked him to secret networks. Some claimed he had escaped with help from powerful contacts. Others believed he was living under a false identity. Years later, his disappearance remains one of Europe's greatest financial mysteries. Markus Braun, the former chief executive officer, faced criminal proceedings. He denied wrongdoing. The legal process continued for years. The case became one of Germany's largest white-collar crime trials. Courtrooms filled with lawyers, financial experts, former executives, and investors hoping to finally understand what had happened. Wirecard itself never recovered. Unlike some companies that survive corporate scandals, its business had been built on confidence. Once confidence disappeared, the company had nothing left. Its reputation was destroyed. Its value vanished. Its name became a warning rather than a brand. Today, business schools around the world teach the Wirecard scandal. Students study how corporate fraud can survive for years. Investors analyze the warning signs. Executives learn the importance of transparency. Auditors examine the failures that allowed the deception to continue. Wirecard is no longer remembered for innovation. It is remembered for one of the greatest financial frauds in European history. The scandal also transformed financial regulation. Governments strengthened oversight. Audit rules became stricter. Corporate governance standards improved. Companies now face greater scrutiny than ever before. Because of Wirecard, the financial world learned that appearances can be dangerously convincing. The story leaves us with several powerful lessons. The first, never confuse rapid growth with genuine success. A rising stock price, a billion-dollar valuation, or impressive headlines do not guarantee an honest business. The second lesson, always question numbers that seem too perfect. Healthy businesses experience challenges, unexpected setbacks, changing markets. When every report looks flawless, investors should ask why. The third lesson, independent journalism matters. Without investigative reporters asking difficult questions, Wirecard's fraud might have continued much longer. Sometimes, the truth begins with a single uncomfortable question. And finally, trust is the most valuable asset any company possesses. It cannot be bought. It cannot be manufactured. And once it is lost, Recovering it may be impossible. Wirecard spent years building investor confidence. It lost that confidence in a matter of days. Today, the name Wirecard represents far more than one failed company. It represents the dangers of unchecked ambition, the cost of weak oversight, the importance of accountability, and the devastating consequences of corporate deception. The next time you hear about a company promising endless growth, record-breaking profits, and a future unlike anything the world has ever seen, remember Wirecard, because history has taught us one simple truth. If a business story sounds too perfect, it deserves to be questioned. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary and want to discover more stories about billion-dollar frauds, startup failures, Wall Street scandals, and the biggest corporate collapses in history, subscribe to Money Trap, turn on notifications, and join us for our next investigation. Because behind every billion-dollar company, there is always a story, and sometimes, the biggest success stories hide the biggest lies. See you in the next documentary.